This podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, possums, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 45 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you will be to make end-of-life decisions.
So please relax, get yourself something to eat and drink, and thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me for our discussion about how breakthrough pain in cancer is managed. In the first half, Charlie answers the question, do swans sing a song before they die? In the second half, I'm going to talk about what breakthrough cancer pain is, what medications you can expect to be used, and how they are given. And in our third half, Charlie answers a question about letting loved ones know about a terminal illness. Our recipe this week embraces all that is pumpkin spice. Our pumpkin spice muffins are made with canned pumpkin, and the recipe gives you an option to make them either as muffins or as loaves. Now, we think muffins are easier to eat at a funeral lunch, but whatever you decide, enjoy. Charlie, how are you?
Marianne, I'm fine. It's cooling down the temperature a bit. That potential huge hurricane off the Atlantic coast looks like it'll miss most of the U.S. and might hit Maine and Nova Scotia. And I learned something really interesting.
What's that?
Oh, good. I'm glad you asked. Thank you.
I'm a good friend.
Yes, you are.
I don't care, but what's that, Charlie?
Wait, what? Oh, listen, are you familiar with the phrase angels share?
No.
Okay. Oh, well, okay. So, listen, angels share refers to when some of the whiskey evaporates every year during aging. Basically, this small amount is released into the air where, according to legend, the angels drink their share of the whiskey. This results in a volume loss of about 2 to 5% per year per barrel, which, over time adds up pretty quickly. I did not know about this.
Well, those are thirsty little angels. Now, how did you learn this fun fact?
At a bar.
Where you learn everything.
Just about nowadays, yes. So I was chatting with a bartender and a bishop, and this is not a joke.
I was really going to say, what?
And the bishop explained to me about this evaporation, angels share. And Paul, my favorite bartender, said yes, and came back with a bottle of Angel's Envy. I had never seen this bourbon before. And he said, oh, well, it's also a rye. And
how can it be both?
It's well, there's whiskey, there's bourbon, there's ryes. So it's just, different categories of whiskey. But this particular thing, Angel's.
Oh, it also comes as a.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I guess it wasn't clear. Yeah, it comes as both a rye and as a bourbon.
I'm very happy that I clarified that for our listeners.
And for me, thanks. So, the bishop very kindly, bought me a Manhattan rye of an Angel Envy's Manhattan rye. Very yummy.
Really?
Yes. Very, very cool. And what I also found out is that after aging, when the bourbon or the rye is dumped out of a barrel, a certain amount of whiskey is left trapped within the wood of every barrel. Mm-hmm. This is called the devil's cut.
Oh. Well, but they don't do anything with that though.
No, it's in the wood. Nothing you can do about it. So it's there. And of course, some people will use then that barrel after it's aged to give a whiskey or a bourbon a different type of taste. But yeah, there you are, the devil's
yeah, I
cut.
can see that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for those fun facts.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking.
I can go through it. I can go through another day now that I know that information.
Yes. Which leads us now into a swan song. A swan song is a metaphor that refers to the final act, gesture, or performance given by a creative person, such as a musician, actor, or artist, just before they retire or die. It may also refer to the final speech or act made by a politician, business leader, or another person in power. It is particularly associated with musicians, and one of the earliest known uses of the saying can be traced back to Franz Schubert. The Austrian composer died at the age of 31 after his health deteriorated when he was at the height of his creativity. The official cause of death was recorded as typhoid fever, but he also showed symptoms of mercury poisoning, which at the time was used to treat syphilis. A collection of 14 songs written shortly before his death and published posthumously by Tobias Haslinger was titled Schwanengesang, which translates directly as Swan Song. Earlier in his career, Schubert had also set to music a poem by Johann Sen called Schwanengesang. Since then, many of the final works of classical composers have been considered swan songs that stand up just as well against pieces they wrote when they were younger. Examples include Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 6 in B minor, Mendelssohn's String Quartet No. 6 in F minor, and J.F. Bach's The Art of Fugue. In pop music, the Beatles' Abbey Road, Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water, and The Show Must Go On, the final track on Queen's 14th studio album, Innuendo, and the last to be released while Freddie Mercury was still alive, are all examples of swan songs that have stood the test of time. And when David Bowie released his final album, Black Star, fans had no idea it would be his farewell album, and that 2 days later he would die from liver cancer. His longtime producer, Tony Visconti, described the album as Bowie's intended swan song and a parting gift for his fans. The legend that swans sing a song before they die is an ancient one. In Aesop's fable, The Swan and the Goose, a man bought a goose and a swan. The goose was intended to be fattened up and eaten, while the swan was kept for its song. When it was time to kill the goose, the man sent his cook to fetch it, but it was dark, and the cook could not distinguish one bird from the other. By mistake, he picked up the swan, but threatened with death. It burst into song which saved its life. In Plato's Phaedo, you try saying that fast 3 times, one of the best-known dialogues of his middle period, along with the Republic, the character Socrates says, "You seem to think me inferior to the swans in prophecy. They sing before too, but when they realize that they must die, they sing most and most beautifully, and they rejoice that they are about to depart to join the God whose servants they are. But men, because of their own fear of death, tell lies about the swans and say that they lament their death and sing in sorrow. They do not reflect that no bird sings when it is hungry or cold or suffers in any way, neither the nightingale, nor the swallow, nor the hoopoe, though they do say that these sing laments when in pain. Nor do the swans, but I believe that as they belong to Apollo, they are prophetic, have knowledge of the future, and sing of the blessings of the underworld, sing and rejoice on that day beyond what they did before. As I believe myself to be a fellow servant with the swans and dedicated to the same God, and have received from my master a gift of prophecy not inferior to theirs, I am no more despondent than they on leaving life." In his account, Socrates says swans sing not only before they die, but also throughout their life. But swans don't sing. Nope, not a note. But let's not let reality get in the way of a good story. Despite reality, the idea of a swan song has permeated throughout Western culture. In the Parlement au Fol, Chaucer describes the swan as a jealous bird that at his death does sing. As Shakespeare referenced the proverb multiple times, notably in The Merchant of Venice, when Portia exclaims, "Let music sound while he doth make his choice. Then, if he lose, he makes a swan-like end, fading in music." Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the English poet, philosopher, and theologian, in his brief poem, On a Volunteer Singer, writes a simple 2 lines. "Swans sing before they die. 'Twere no bad thing should certain persons die before they sing."
Oh, I know. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
It is. Swan song.
Now we know.
And you know the phrase, I just thought of this. What is it? When the fat lady, when yes,
It's not over till the fat lady sings.
There we are.
Which they're talking about opera.
Yes.
I think, right?
Opera, but I wonder if it's also a metaphor for this. Do you remember this? Oh, I just remembered this. The series Saint Elsewhere?
Oh, yeah.
The very last, at the very, very end, the very last episode, and it might have been the closing line, because the hospital is going to be closed down. And I think it's Howie Long who says something about, well, you know what, everything, there's still hope. Maybe the hospital will stay open, something to that effect, because it ain't over till the fat lady sings. And one of the patients had laryngitis and suddenly had her voice back, and it was an opera singer, and she suddenly had her voice back and sang, and I believe that is how the series closed, or maybe there was one last scene, but it was.
How could you possibly remember all that?
Angel's Envy?
Yeah, I think it's the devil's grog or whatever it's called.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So with all that, folks, please go to our webpage for this week's recipe of pumpkin streusel muffins, plus additional resources for this program. Your tax-deductible donations are always welcome so that we can continue to offer you quality program. Thank you in advance for making your donation at www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number 1, dies.org. Marianne?
Thanks, Charlie. For many reasons, be it fear, lack of exposure to serious illness and death, fear, did I mention fear? Many people do not know about many aspects about the end of life. Now, we're here to give you that information, but we know that many people don't listen to this until they absolutely need it. And by the time they absolutely need it, it may be hard to get your mind around some of the information. The topic of planning for and managing breakthrough cancer pain is probably one of those topics. I hope that those of you who are listening will share this with others so that perhaps they can get ahead of the curve and alleviate some of the fear that they're going to die in terrible pain. Now, this fear is really well-founded because in the not-so-distant past, healthcare practitioners have not managed pain very effectively. I'm confident that each family has their own horror story of a family member dying in terrible pain. Dying in this way is not necessary, and each country can ensure that pain medications can get to the people who need them at the end of life. I've heard many patients tell me that they don't want to get addicted to pain medicine as they are dying, and we have other shows about this topic which you can find in our show notes. Just let me say that this is not going to happen in the case of managing cancer pain, especially managing cancer pain toward the end. Trust me that you will feel better if you let your pain be managed, and you'll be able to do more with your family. This is not the time to worry about addiction. I also hear people say that their doctor is trying to dope them up by giving them a few different medications for pain. Again, this is not the intent. And today I'm going to explain to you about the pain medicine that we usually prescribe, how it's used, why it's used. So let's get into it. The typical pain medicine used for cancer pain is morphine, which works on the central nervous system and reduces feelings of pain by interrupting the way the nerve signals move between the brain and the body. It's a great drug for managing pain. Many people are really worried, though, about what's the meaning of taking morphine. Is it time for the morphine? Oh, no, it's not time for the morphine. There's this whole thing. If you're having pain, it's probably time for the morphine. It doesn't mean anything more than that. Now, cancer pain is not a stable type of pain. It'll vary with things like how well you slept, how much activity you're doing, the position that you're in, stress. You get the idea. If it were stable, we could order one type of pain medication and be done and go and enjoy our golf game. But since it is not, we need a second medication for what is called breakthrough pain, which is just as it sounds, pain that breaks through the regularly scheduled pain medication. Now, to keep this explanation as simple as possible, let's assume that the most common medication that's used for cancer pain, morphine, is going to be the drug that's prescribed. And I know morphine has a bad reputation, and people think they're very close when morphine is prescribed. And while that was true in the past, or as my grandmother would say, in the old country, that is not how we use morphine now. So morphine comes in two types: immediate release morphine and extended release morphine. And we use both types so that people do not have to worry about being in pain. So let me give you a typical scenario so you can see how this works. The extended release morphine is ordered around the clock, meaning 24 hours a day, and is either given every 8 or every 12 hours around the clock. This is the continuous management of the pain to keep you from having pain. It's slow-acting medicine that takes about 1.5 hours to start to work and at its peak action at about 3 hours. This is the medicine that is taken on a schedule, whether you think you need it or not. It's ordered on a schedule, take it on a schedule. It'll keep you from having pain, and it'll help you live your life for as long as possible. People who do not follow the prescription will find that they feel irritable, that they don't eat well, and that they have trouble eating. They have trouble sleeping. They're just cranky. There's no reason to do this for yourself when the medicine is there to help you feel better. I've seen people not take their medicine and then come to my office with a long list of symptoms that they would not be having if they took their medicine. The second type of medicine that we prescribe with the long-acting morphine is what is called immediate release morphine. This works quickly, within about 30 minutes. It'll work for about 3 to 4 hours and peaks in about an hour. So we know that the immediate release morphine is only going to work for about 3 or 4 hours. It's out of your system by then. Think of the extended release morphine as Diana Ross and the short-acting as the Supremes. They each have their job and are just so much better together. What we want to avoid is for you to worry about the things that you want to do are going to bring on pain, but that your long-acting morphine can't be taken for another 6 hours. We don't want you to sit in pain for 6 hours. That is why you get your immediate release morphine, take a dose, and within 30 minutes have your pain managed. As Charlie says, voila! Immediate relief morphine is usually ordered every 1 to 2 hours as you need it around the clock. As you can see, we use the two types of morphine so that if you have pain, we can keep it in control. Your job is to take it as prescribed. Remember, the immediate release is there if you are having pain between your scheduled long-acting morphine. Always take your long-acting morphine. Whether you take the immediate release or not is guided by if you are having pain. Now, if you go out take one of your immediate release pills with you. Never take your whole bottle with you. You don't want those lost. You don't want them stolen. But you don't go out without taking a pain pill with you. The last thing about morphine is that I want to remind you to take your stool softener or whatever bowel regimen your practitioner has ordered for you. Please. Morphine slows the movement of stool through the intestinal tract, which gives your bowel a lot more time to take the water out of the stool, which results in a hard, dry stool and constipation. Constipation is a miserable feeling. Just take your stool softener, please. Now, I don't have a song from the Supremes for you, but you will feel like singing if you use your pain medications correctly and trust how they work. Questions, Charles?
Holy shit, Marianne. First, I love your metaphor about Diana Ross and the Supremes. A little shout out there to Detroit.
Our hometown.
Yes.
Detroit is.
So, yes, it's the what you mentioned about two things. I'm gonna stumble through this, folks. Like Marianne said, prepare. Do not wait until the last minute where everything is in a frenzy. Everyone's going nutso, and you can't think clearly. Please talk about this with your family, with your friends, your bartender. Just get this all out so people know your wishes, but, figure out what you want first for yourself and then share that information. Secondly, with Marianne, what you said about the morphine, yes, that's what happened with my mom. She died at 91, and a few months before she was beginning to experience pain, and I mentioned to her about morphine, that we talked to the doctor, and she was horrified because she grew up in a time of morphine fiends, people out of control on morphine, and she didn't want to become an addict. And there's no chance my mother would ever become an addict. So we discussed it with my dad, and he said yes, but to respect her wishes, and I'm paraphrasing here, and not make her into a morphine fiend. And it didn't take much.
Mom, I'm going to make you into a morphine fiend.
Oh my God.
Now.
And and again, she did not need much, but it really did help her. Just everything in moderation. What was the other thing you said?
Well, it's not everything in moderation. It's everything as your body needs and as prescribed.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. And when I say in moderation, that's what I meant to say. You said it much better.
Because you don't want to say, oh, I know they ordered, 10 milligrams, but, I'm only going to take 5. No.
Right, exactly, yes.
You're not going to feel good at 5.
Yep.
Take the 10. We know what we're doing.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's not. No, there's a difference between what I said and what you said, and listen to what Marianne said. And there was
ignore that man behind the curtain.
Ignore the man behind the curtain. Okay, that's it. There was something else, and I can't think of it. So I'm sure later on this afternoon, when I'm in the middle of something else, it'll pop back into my mind. But then it'll be too short. Moving on to our third act.
No, it's our third half. The third act.
Yes, the third act is Act 3.
Whole other thing.
It's a whole other thing. So, moving on to our third half, the Ethicist newsletter in the New York Times offers advice on life's trickiest situations and moral dilemmas from the philosopher Kwame Anthony Appiah. Here's one that was published earlier this month. Question: I am 76 and have lived a full and interesting life. My doctor recently gave me the news that the cancer I was treated for last year has returned and metastasized. I have started a course of immunotherapy treatments that hopefully should keep the cancer at bay for roughly the next 2 years. I have not told my wife, my son, or any of my friends about this. I don't want to have to endure 2 years of pity. I would rather enjoy life with everyone as I have always done, and then break the news only when the time comes. A very small percentage of people with the cancer I have are able to survive past the average 2-year period with the treatments, but I would be a fool to count on that. I can also imagine everyone hoping against hope and then being devastated when a miracle doesn't happen. Am I wrong to keep this from the people I love?
So what's your thought on that before we read the answer from the ethicist?
No, I would tell. If I didn't tell my family and favorite bartenders I was dying, they'd kill me. What about you? What do you think?
Well, I think that it's about trust in one case, in that, if you're the wife in the family and you say, oh my God, he kept this big thing from me. What else did he keep from me? What else did he not tell me?
Good point.
So, and Luna said she agreed that it could be an issue of trust. The second thing is that there's kind of work that needs to be done, at the end of life. And people who die suddenly without warning aren't given that opportunity to do that. And the people who are left behind have a much more complicated grief because they say, well, I wanted to tell him this and I wanted to tell him that. And I always thought, well, if the cancer came back, that we would go on that fishing trip or whatever. And if you deny the people who love you the opportunity to begin to grieve and to be able to say goodbye and to do whatever it is that they want to do with you, I as a family member, I would be very disappointed and sad and maybe even angry that, I was denied that.
Yeah.
And also, this guy's got stuff he should be doing. Like, if he suddenly starts cleaning out the garage, his wife's going to say, why are you doing that? You haven't done that for 30 years, and he's going to say, well, I might only have 2 years left, so I thought I'd get this done, Or, conversely, she'd say, you only have 2 years left, get that garage cleaned out. One way or the other, there might be things that people want to do or should do. And I think you're denying them. And plus, by not telling them, isn't he lying to them? So those are the things I think about.
Yeah. No, I agree.
What does the ethicist have to say?
Well, so his response, the decision of whether to disclose your situation is, of course, up to you. But living with a secret can be isolating, and sharing your news with your wife and your son, at least, could help relieve that burden. And your loved ones would want to feel that they did what they could to support you during this time. They may be saddened later to learn that you face your diagnosis alone. You should also bear in mind that treatments can have side effects and that health declines are seldom linear. Your condition could reveal itself much earlier than you had planned, leaving the people in your life confused and hurt that you left them unprepared. By depriving your loved ones of the facts, you deprive them of the chance to face the future together with you. Because your diagnosis affects their lives as well, I hope you will let them come to terms with this important truth. If you fear a procession of pitying looks and aggressive sympathy, no, really, how are you? Let your loved ones know that this is not what you want, that you're reconciled to what is happening, and that you hope to go on living life as usual for as long as you can, sharing it with them. In his memoir, Martin Amis, who died this year, wrote about births and deaths as ordinary miracles and ordinary disasters. In the ordinary miracle, 2 people enter a room and 3 come out. In the ordinary disaster, 1 person enters a room and none come out. Give your nearest and dearest time to process your bad news. And I would guess that the situation, however disastrous, might become in that way ordinary to them too. Yes, I agree.
That's a good answer.
It is a good answer. So you 2 kids, you and the ethicist, are on the same page, as it were.
As it were.
Yes. As it were, please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete, and from William Shakespeare's old pal, Ben Jonson, drink today and drown all sorrow. You shall perhaps not do it tomorrow. Best while you have it, use your breath. There is no drinking after death.
And I'm Marianne Batso. And we'll see you next week. Remember, take your pain medication as prescribed, and every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.